Each of us shares a relationship with music. In fact, all of Earth acts as a musical chorus. We can hear birds chirping, the wind kissing the trees, the sound of soil crunching under the weight of construction equipment, your favorite song, or your favorite film score, if you're a nerd like me. The fact is, music connects our ears to our emotions. In this episode of the Mindful PharmD podcast, I sit down with a good friend of mine, Collin Angell, who loves music. Not only is he a classically trained pianist, but he also knows how to play the drums. We sit down and we talk about how music has an impact on us and how music can help us cope when we are experiencing stress or just going through the daily life struggle. Hey everybody, it's the mind behind the microphone. Do you know the number one way that we can keep this podcast alive? That's right. It's by you giving us a rating. Wherever you listen, give us 5 stars. Let me know how we're doing in the comments. You can email me personally at themindfulpharmd@gmail.com. themindfulpharmd@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. If you have a topic you want to hear about on the podcast, if you have a connection with somebody who could sit down with me for an interview, let me know. Send me a personal email. And as always, thank you so much for listening. You're listening to the Mindful PharmD podcast. Welcome and 1,000 thanks for tuning in. This podcast is about all of us. I'm your host and the mind behind the microphone, Matt Manhero. My focus on this podcast is to explore the mind through genuine conversations, thought-provoking ideas, and the reality that the story of mental health is incomplete. Welcome back, Mindful Nation. Thank you for listening again to another episode of the Mindful PharmD podcast. My guest today is a good friend of mine, Collin Angell, who's a musician and mathematician for all intents and purposes. He recently graduated from the University of South Carolina with his degree with the Bachelor's of Science in Mathematics and a minor in Japanese. Yes, he spent some time over in Japan, and we might get a chance to talk about his experience today and a little bit of what he plans to do with that experience. But he's passionate about music, all things Marvel Comics. Collin has a long history and relationship with music. And so I invited him on the show today to talk about the impact music has had in his life and how it continues to be a source of creative expression and stress reduction. So Collin, I appreciate you coming on the show today, man. How do you feel now that you're done with school?
It feels great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, I definitely look forward to it being over. I love the experience though. I don't have no regrets. It was a wonderful 4 years. But I'm ready for the next stage of my life, I can say.
Awesome, man. The next stage. And that next stage entails you sent me some information. You're training to become an actuary, right?
Yes, that's one of the many things I want to do in my life.
And what about this JET program, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program? You're working to get back over there to Japan, as I understand it. What do you plan to do with that in that program?
Yeah, so the JET program stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. So they have applicants from all over the world outside of Japan. And if you're accepted, then you're allowed to go to Japan and help teach English in regular high schools or middle schools or elementary schools. So it's a very very interesting program. It's run by the Japanese government in communication with all of the other foreign governments. In my case, the American government.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm waiting to hear back on whether I'll actually be able to go or not. So,
And you spent some time over in Japan a few years ago, right?
that's true. Yep, summer of 2019.
Summer of 2019, gotcha. And what was that experience like? How was it, living in Japan, and how long were you there?
It was wonderful. I was there I was in Okinawa,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a small island to the south of Japan. It's still part of Japan, but it used to be its own country. So it's got its own culture, its own vibe, so to speak. Very different from mainland Japan, but they do speak Japanese, so it is still Japan, and it was very fun. Got to meet a lot of people. I was over there actually on a mission trip, and what I was doing was teaching piano lessons because that was my expertise in the church, is teaching and playing piano, and they wanted some assistance with teaching new people to play piano for their new church establishments. So that was a very, very fun experience. I was there for 2 months.
What was it like, man, teaching? I mean, music is already complicated, right? I mean, I've tried my hand a few times at trying to learn the piano. You know that I dabble a little bit in the guitar, but just music is already a complicated process. I can't imagine what it was like trying to train someone whose second language may not have been, or whose first language may not have been English.
Well, yeah, it would be, but fortunately for me, all of the students I had were fluent enough in English to understand everything I said. I was definitely not fluent enough in Japanese to be able to teach in Japanese at the time. That may be a different story now. It's a couple years later. But yeah, I definitely didn't have to do any Japanese, piano terminology or anything.
Well, good. Like I said, I can't. I mean, I couldn't imagine how challenging that would have been. I remember you sharing that story in a church service we had after you came back, or after you had spent some time over there, and one lady in particular had picked it up so well. I mean, she was able to play songs after about and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was like 2 weeks of training.
Even less, a week and a half. It was insane. I've never had a student that adept and that this absorbent of all the information I threw at her, because it was every day we were just learning theory and chords and scales, and she was able to take it all in, and she was able to apply it herself. It was really incredible for me.
Really, yeah, man, that's impressive. We're talking today, and this episode is all about music and how it impacts our lives and the relationship that we have with it. And we might get a chance to dabble a little bit in some of those articles and stuff that I shared with you. But for a minute here, talk a little bit about your music origins. I think every superhero, right? We love superheroes, has a great origin story. And how did you start your journey to becoming a musician?
So I guess it's all thanks to my mom. She kind of forced me to start learning piano when I was, I believe, 10 years old. I was not interested in piano at the time at all. I think I did like drums though when I was a kid. I remember there's a video of me playing around on a drum set when I was as young as 3. So I've always had a sense of rhythm and a sense of beat for me. But my mom got me on the piano when I was 10. And I didn't like it for the first year or so. For some reason, I thought it was a girl's instrument, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But eventually it grew on me. And I started to kind of own it, own that ability and that talent. So I trained classically under a classical musician for 5 years. Or I think it was about 5 years. And then when I went into high school, I transitioned to a new teacher, and he taught me a lot about jazz. He showed me the ins and outs of jazz music theory, and how I could apply that to my church music playing, because that's what I was starting to play in church around that time. And my teacher was able to kind of show me a lot of the connections between church music and jazz music, because there's a lot. And it was very, very insightful and helpful. After high school, I've just been basically a self-taught musician. I go to YouTube. I watch lots of popular music channels like Adam Neely or Charles Cornell, and those are very helpful and insightful. And that's how I see myself as a musician, is that I'm always learning, constantly growing. There's never a day where I've learned enough about the piano or learned enough about music that I can just coast for the rest of my life. It's just that there's always something new to explore and something better to refine, something to refine about your playing and how you listen to music as well. It's been an amazing journey. I've loved it.
Yeah. What was that spark that sort of, if you can recall, I don't know, how sitting down one day and you're practicing a song or practicing a piece, and it just sort of, something just clicked for you. Do you remember that day, or what it was like, that to experience that creative spark where you were like, yeah, this is my jam. Like I can keep learning with this instrument.
I don't know if there was a specific moment. Maybe I think my teacher pushed me very hard. My first teacher,
Mm-hmm.
she advanced me very quickly, and I think like when my parents would record me playing, and then I would watch my recitals, and I'd just be like, wow, like that's me doing all these these really fast finger movements and
Mm-hmm.
making this beautiful sound. Like, wow, this is actually something I should invest my time into, because it's actually really rewarding, not only for the people who listen to it, but for myself as well. It's something that it's just rewarding. It's how I take investing into any new skill.
Mm-hmm.
Like another hobby of mine is solving the Rubik's Cube. And that's something else that I've started at a very young age, and I've continued to this day, because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to improve at something and to get better at it and refine it, and to get to try to go to a high level with it, because you understand ins and outs of it. You become an expert at it, and you can start teaching other people about it, and it's just a super rewarding experience.
Mm.
So I think
You-
that moment was probably like when I watched myself and I could realize
mm.
that I was doing something impressive, something
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to be a systems thinker, and and I've said that so many times on this podcast over, its brief history so far. And what that means is, a lot of the things that we experience in our lives, I truly believe are interconnected, and they go a long way into shaping who we are and who we become. And, specifically in the realm of music, earlier you mentioned that, your jazz teacher, your second teacher, kind of helped you navigate jazz, right? The
Yes.
genre of jazz, and then use that in, church music, and in,
Mhm.
whether you're playing gospel or contemporary or whatever the case might be. Can you, at a high level, maybe unpack some of the connected elements? Because a lot of times, and I'm asking this because I think a lot of times we compartmentalize our experiences, and we compartmentalize our, okay, we're talking about music. We compartmentalize music. We say jazz is jazz, gospel is gospel, classical is classical. And
Yeah.
while each one may have its unique traits, I do believe that there's this relationship that they can all share. So specifically, in your experience, jazz and church music, jazz and gospel, jazz and contemporary, what are some of those things, those elements that connect? If you can express that.
Yeah. So basically, my jazz teacher, he really took me down the road of music theory.
Mm-hmm.
Funnily enough, my classical teacher, when I was learning under her, she we had a music theory like little book, like a workbook that I would work through, but I actually didn't enjoy that part at all. When I was at that age, all I cared about was just trying to play a little song, you know.
Yeah.
But when I started learning from my jazz teacher, he's the one who drilled into me the scales that I need to know and the chords that come out of the scale. And that's where I started to see the connections. Because in jazz and in church music, you play mainly chords. But these chords are built from the scale of the key that the song is in. So if the song is in the key of C major, then you have a scale that you play. You have a scale that the key of C resides in. And from that C major scale, you can build all of the C major chords. And if you have that understanding, then everything starts to make sense, because when you listen to a song, you can kind of realize what chords feel like they're at home, or what chords feel like they fit in the song, and what chords feel like they musically don't fit. And by don't fit, I don't mean it sounds bad. It just sounds a little off. It's because what's happening is there's a note in there that's not a part of the key's scale, and that's what your ear notices. It's like, ooh, what was that? It's a little color. It's a little flair.
Can you play some of that? I know you brought your piano just in case here. Can you maybe demonstrate a little bit of that?
Yeah, of course. So right now I'll just play the C major scale. Mm-hmm. Tell me if you can hear it clearly.
We hear it. Yep.
Okay. So this scale has seven notes. I play 8 notes, but the 8th note is just the same as the first. So I've got C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And these 7 notes are part of the C major scale. So what you can notice is these are the notes I've played, but there are 5 other notes that I have not played in the scale. And those are all of the black keys. Those are the sharps or flats. So this C sharp note, I did not play. This D sharp, I didn't play. This F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp, I did not play in the C major scale. So I'll play the scale again. So if I stay within this scale, then I'm staying within the key of C. If I play chords in it, like the C major chord, or if I play a G major chord, or an F major, or a D minor, all of these chords are still using those original 7 notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And if I stay within those chords, then I'm still within the key of C, and it sounds like it fits. But if I played something like this, what if I played this chord?
Sounds like a train wreck.
Yeah, it sounds a little weird, because this chord, I'm playing an F minor chord. So I'm playing an F, and then I'm playing a G sharp, and I'm playing a C. So this G sharp is not in the C major scale. So I'll play the C major scale again, so we can re-establish the context we're in. I'll play it again. Now if I play this G sharp note, it just sounds off, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like, so here's C major, and if I play C major with this G sharp note instead, that doesn't sound good at all, right?
Yeah.
Or it sounds, maybe it sounds cool, but it sounds off, right?
Right.
So those are called non-diatonic notes. So the diatonic notes are C through B in the C major scale, and then the non-diatonic notes would be all of these black keys. And that's where all of the theory starts, and that's where it all builds, and that's how you understand the connections between jazz and church music, and even classical music. Classical music, they don't use chords as much. They do use chords, but they are still building their piece based on what key the song is in. And if they know the key the song is in, then they're using the diatonic framework. So they start with the major scale, and they use mainly chords that are from that major scale, or they use mainly notes from that major scale. And if they use any other notes, then those are called accidentals, and it's notated in the sheet music. So everything is built from that scale that you have to know. So that's why my jazz teacher, he would drill those scales into me every single lesson, and they were very tedious, but they were very necessary. So I do the same thing with my piano students.
You know, I as I'm listening to you play and you demonstrate for us, you know, I can see clearly the connection with that. You know, music connects our ears to our emotions, right? And you know, even before you even, as you played some of those notes or those chords that didn't belong, before you asked me the question, that doesn't sound right, right? Like I'm thinking to myself, man, that sounds a little off, right? Like I had an emotional response to that, like, okay, well, let's play something different because, you know, it doesn't really feel in the context that you were creating. It didn't really feel too good to be hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I had a biological response to that. So why do you think? Let's kind of theorize a little bit. Why do you think music impacts us so deeply, man? I think that you know, we've been intelligently designed to, again, have this relationship with, you know, music is, to me, is more than just an art form, right? I think it has so many implications for our lives, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But why do you think music impacts us so deeply?
That's
I know it's a lot to
question.
unpack, but just sort of, you know, what comes to mind when you think about, you know, how you play, you know, because I know when you're there and you're playing, you're not just playing, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing music. There's more than
Yes.
just these equations and this knowledge, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
feeling that goes behind what
Yeah.
you're playing,
Absolutely.
you know?
So I'd like to I'd like to go back to my jazz teacher again. He's kind of the reason that I started being able to see music like this as more than just like a bunch of notes to replicate on a piece of paper.
Right.
Because he kind of recognized that my what I was adept at was the mathematical side of the piano or music. So I could kind of see the connections, connect the concepts. But he saw that I was lacking a little bit in the feeling department, you know, trying to express yourself in the music. And so that's where he pushed me a little bit more. He would say, okay, I want you to just play something. And I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And then he'd be like, just play something. Just play what you feel, or just try to say something with the piano. And I was very bad at it at first. I didn't know what that meant. But over time, through my own exploration of music and what it means to people, that's how that what. So this comes to one reason I think music affects us so deeply is because we connect it to experiences.
Mm-hmm.
We connect it to personal experiences. Probably the easiest case to see this in is our childhood, because the music that we most resonate with is the music from our childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are very nostalgic for the music that was played from the time we were teenagers to the time we were young adults. And after that time, people tend to not really care for the new music that comes out. They just want to stick to what they are comfortable with. And why are they comfortable with that music and not the new music? Well, it's because music is connected to those personal experiences, and those personal experiences at that time, when you're a teenager, you're trying to find your self-identity, you kind of wrap yourself around a lot of things around you. And one thing you wrap yourself in is the music that you listen to, because the music that you listen to is often associated with the friends that you have. It's associated with the activities that you take part in. whether it's going to dance or going to sing, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason why it affects us so deeply, is because we tie it to our identity.
You know, and from an empirical perspective, you know, what you're saying rings true, because in one of the studies I was looking at and researching, just trying to better understand how music impacts us, is when you talk about being familiar. So they familiarity, right, and connecting music to our experiences. One of the things I saw was that when they compared familiar music, right, let's just say they took a group of people and they wanted to see how the music might reduce their stress levels. And they took a group and they said, well, we're going to play something pre-selected for you, right? The researchers selected a piece of music.
Yeah.
But then they also had, and some of the studies had, where the study participants selected their own music to play,
Yeah.
you know, following a stressor task. And they showed that the familiar music reduced the stress levels, and they measured cortisol and adrenaline and all these different things, reduced the stress level faster and better compared to when the researchers selected a piece that the participant was not familiar with. And so what you're saying is absolutely true, and it's been proven time and time again in research, that this familiar association that we have with music helps us in various ways. You know, when who hasn't been there before? And I know you just finished school, right? So I know that you're getting ready to enter a new phase of stress. But anyway, you coming out of school,
Yeah.
I'm sure you had some stressful moments, and we know what happens when we're stressed out. Again, our adrenaline levels go up, our cortisol goes up. We might experience a faster heart rate, our muscles tighten, our blood pressure rises. We navigate, or try to navigate, this what they call the flight, fight, faint, or freeze mechanism in our bodies, and so can you speak about a time, say maybe you were stressed out, right, and you just went to the piano to play some music. Have you ever had an experience like that, where the music just, again, it kind of helped you relax, maybe get over a hump or a slump that you were in?
Yes. Something does immediately come to mind.
Yeah.
It was shocking, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I thought of in that dark moment was to just go to the piano. It was my freshman year of college, so it was a very tumultuous time, trying to establish new roots, make new friends, and something didn't work out the way I expected it to.
Right.
And it kind of devastated me. But so where I went to express that and to try to materialize it, so it wasn't just in my head, was at the piano. And I still remember that moment. So when you say it, when you ask me to bring up an experience like that, it immediately comes to mind.
Yeah.
I don't really remember a song I played exactly, but just to get it out there, I guess.
I've seen you play before, right? I mean, I have the privilege of watching you play in church and singing along with you as you play. And sometimes I've sat and just sort of watched you perform. And you do this thing where when you're playing something, if you're really feeling it, you sort of, you probably, as I said, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But your right shoulder kind of goes up a little bit, and your neck sort of hangs to the side. You kind of,
Yeah.
you kind of like, what's happening when that? What are you thinking about, man? When you're playing like that, and you're in that moment, right? That creative space.
Oh, those are the best moments, because I'm not really thinking as much as I'm talking, I like to think, or I'm singing. I'm trying to sing with the piano. And that's the gap that I had to cross, that my jazz teacher was trying to get me to cross. And in those moments of church where the atmosphere is just it's raised to a different level where everyone is kind of, I don't know, how would you describe it? It's like,
I don't know, maybe expectation, hopefulness.
yeah. And
You know,
and there's sometimes, like, when a song is played in church, you can kind of tell when it's connecting to the audience or not. When the lyrics are meaning something to them, or when it's just going through the motions. And when the song is really hitting, that's when I find it easier for me to tap into that groove where I'm just kind of carried by the music, I suppose. And I'm able to just let the piano sing for me. So to me, like, an instrument is just as vital to a band as the vocals are. And this is why jazz is so impressive and so impactful, is because jazz musicians, they don't see their instruments as just background noise or as background pieces of the vocals who are doing the real music or the real song. No. The musicians are also playing the real song. The vocals are a part of it as well. Everything fuses together.
Yeah, it's a system.
Yes, it's a wonderful composition.
Yeah.
And I think people should be allowed to express themselves in those moments. And that's what I do in those moments.
Yeah. You just said something. My wife and I were having a conversation the other day about, Hannah's classically trained, vocalist, and she's toured with her high school down in Vero Beach, Florida, concerts and whatnot, and again singing classical music, and then of course she's also been involved in church services, varying churches across her upbringing. But we were having a conversation the other day about this thing. You just mentioned something about how the vocals are just as vital as the instruments, right? And the two go hand in hand. Well, she the other day, in service, we always sit down and we talk about how service went and whatnot. And she said to me, "Babe, you sounded really good, when you were singing." And I said, "Yeah, I think running is helping me to have broader, not just broader range, but just be able to open up my lungs more, this kind of thing." And she said to me, she said, you're people make the mistake of thinking that your body is not an instrument. It is. And she said that when she was training classically, her teacher would tell her, "Listen, if you're not humming a little bit after you sing, you're not doing it right, because you're using your lungs, you're using your diaphragm and these muscles to expand and bring in air, and then you're going through this process, just like you get the image of a horned instrument, like as you know what I'm saying, like as you expand and let that air in, and then you contract to let that air out, your body is going through a process of exercise." And I would imagine it's the same on an instrument as you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your body is literally making music.
Yeah. And that, I think that's powerful, man, because again, music is so awesome, dude, because it's more than just something you do, right? More than just, it's like you said earlier, it's an experience, and if you give yourself to it, I think that's what makes some of the greatest musicians, greatest vocalists, is that they really give themselves to that experience, to be used, in that moment, to maybe to help themselves cope, or to help somebody else cope, or to help somebody else overcome. You listen to their lyrics, and you listen to the melody of the song and how everything is playing, and it really does bring out, again, this emotional response and this emotional experience. I know for a fact that in therapy, for example, clinicians use music as a way to help people cope through or following traumatic experiences. They might use, there's this thing called drum circles, where people sit down, and they improvise, and play different beats or whatever. And they found this technique to help sufferers following a, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, I mean, it has implications for military personnel. It has implications for people who might be victims of sexual abuse or sexual assault. And, you think that music is just this separate thing that we can learn and we can have knowledge behind. But man, it has, really it has healing powers, So,
Yeah, it's I don't know. Some people like to theorize about like why exactly it feels we get that resonant feeling with music.
Yeah.
And some people think it has to do with like the actual frequencies of the notes that are being played.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of like attune your body to it or somehow, but I don't know. That's just there are lots of theories for why music is so resonant, why we can resonate with it and connect it to so many other things in life.
Yeah, they've even found too, looking at one of those articles I sent you, the National Institutes of Health, they've even found that in children, music training can assist in language development. When they compare children who've been trained to play the piano, for example, or to sing, they, compared to children who haven't been trained, this, learning music can actually help children develop language skills. I mean, that's powerful, man. I mean, in 2017, the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts and the National Institutes of Health, they launched this initiative called Sound Health, Music and the Mind. And their whole goal was to bring together neuroscientists, music therapists, and other biomedical researchers in an effort to deepen our understanding of how music can be used. Music can be used clinically, and for us, the majority of I wouldn't say the majority, but maybe the majority of my experience with music has been in church. In terms of a positive experience with music. But I mean, I've even gone so far as to listen to, and I'm gonna nerd out a minute here, so go with me, Collin. All right, but I like to listen to soundtracks, for example, big blockbuster movie soundtracks.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite music composers is Michael Giacchino, who's done so many different movies. One of my favorite ones being Avengers: Infinity War. And my boys even can recognize when I turn on MG Michael Giacchino, when I turn on his music and start listening to it, like we're it's like we're watching the movie all over again, because we can connect with that moment in the movie when this big score is going on and all the instruments are playing and stuff. Man, I love music, man.
It's how art. It's one of the ways art is so beautiful, because the point of art is to express things or express ideas, express emotions. You're always expressing something, and you express it through different channels, and music is one of those. And in something like a movie or a film, they have multiple channels to express this art through, right? They have the visual.
Yep.
They have the human with the actors, and they have the voices of the actors. They have the ideas of the author or of the writers.
Yep.
And they have the director who's communicating. So there's the communication aspect. So like the Avengers theme, that always it has that motif. It goes bum 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 bum. And when you hear that, you just get that rush. You get that feeling of majesty or like of heroism. It's like
something's
they're here
awesome
to
about
save.
To happen. Yeah.
Them almost. That's why national anthems are so impactful and important to have.
Yeah. So as we kind of round it out, what I like to ask my guests, what is mindfulness to you?
So an interesting synonym, I thought about this a little bit because you gave me this question before. So I realized that a synonym of mindful that is often used is considerate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And I thought about that word a little more, considerate. It has the word consider in it. And that's a cognitive function, right?
Yep.
It means thinking, basically. So to be mindful, but what's interesting is that when we say the word considerate, we use that in a context where we're trying to be considerate of someone's feelings, usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or be considerate of their circumstance or their situation and try to understand them. So it's not the way we think of like rationalism, where we try to like come up with an argument. It's not that kind of considering where you do some kind of philosophy. No,
Yeah.
it's the kind of considering where you consider the person, you consider everything around you. You consider yourself, your thoughts, where you're coming from, but you also consider the person that you're interacting with or the people you interact with. And that's, I think, what being mindfulness is about. It's being mindful of yourself, and that means your biases, your presumptions, your past, the memories that you cling on to, that you derive your identity from. And then you also are mindful of how that interacts with the world around you. So with the people that you interact with, you're considerate of their perspective, of their opinions, and their background, right? And you kind of realize that everything around you comes from somewhere, which comes from someone.
Mm.
So that's, I think, what being mindful is to me. It's
How do you practice mindfulness? Do you have any specific
I don't
practice?
know. Read, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reading's probably actually a really good way to practice that, because you're engaging the thoughts of someone else, right? And then you're trying to synergize that with your own life. I just finished writing a thesis to graduate with honors at University of South Carolina. I had to write a thesis, and I did my thesis on interpreting the Bible. Mm-hmm. From a philosophical perspective. So I learned a lot about hermeneutics, which is the kind of the study of interpretation.
Yeah. And
that's where I learned a lot about how reading is not a one-way street. It's not just you absorbing information, lending your perspective to the information, and then interacting with that information, and then it comes back to you. So that's how I've learned to kind of see what I'm doing when I'm reading. And that's a good way to practice mindfulness, because you're mindful of yourself, and then you're mindful of the thing you're interacting with, and then you're mindful of the person that provided the thing that you're interacting with.
Awesome.
I'm getting in very philosophical territory right now.
No, I like that. No, I like that, because, again, these are things that we need to be thinking about, as and again, this episode's been about music, but even when we're, playing, singing, listening, improvising, creating, when we're having this interaction with music, I mean, music is a way, for you to practice mindfulness, and just being aware of what's happening in your body as you listen to those chords, play those chords. It's about awareness and knowing, hey, man, when I play this C major or this, F sharp, there's a biological response happening, where I'm, and it's going to be different for everybody. To some people, it might cause them to relax. It might, depending upon what you're playing and the musical piece you're listening to, but it might cause some people to relax, and it might cause some people to want to, put on their running shoes. But the point is, you're aware of what's happening to you, and happening to your body in that moment. So, who's your favorite artist or music composer or singer? Who's your favorite? Just pick one.
I don't know.
You got to pick one.
What I appreciate the most in an artist is someone that isn't just manufacturing a song, they're trying to write a song. What I mean by that is, like, they try to compose a piece when they write. So ask the band to be like, hey, play something that sounds good for this,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
But the artists I respect the most are the ones who go through the whole process. So someone like Israel Houghton, for example,
Mm-hmm.
he's very good at this for the most part. Another good one is Ty Tribbett. He's a gospel artist. His songs, many of them, you can see that he's present in the process. He's present in the song. His
Yeah.
footprint is composed. It's very unique. Usually, he takes different directions that not everyone does. Uses different instruments or different ways. So it's always a delight to listen to a new song of his because I know it won't. It'll sound like Ty Tribbett, but it won't just sound like the last song you played and the song before that.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Both of those are actually one of my two favorite artists as well for that same reason. And,
Yeah,
if I could sort of give some input too, one of the things I like in an artist is the story that
yeah,
that not only that the music tells, but that the lyrics tell.
yeah.
And one song in particular I was listening to the other day by Israel Houghton, and he talks about God's love in it, and he says, I think the chorus goes, that's hold on, give me a second. That's why I love you, because you first loved me, because you first loved me. And then the bridge, he kind of gives more reason. He says, you gave me a hope. You
Mm-hmm.
gave me a future. I love you. I love you because you first loved me. And it's like, you can almost, if you know a little bit about Israel, you can almost see, he came from a broken home. He lived in, the projects for all intents and purposes, mixed cultures. He was the son of, uh, I think his father was black, his mother was white, but he grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood. And so when you're listening to him sort of unpack his story in his songs about
Yeah,
the, grace of God in his life, and how, God gave him a hope and a future, and just the way he writes it, he kind of got like this smooth jazz kind of tone to it. I don't know, man. That just, again, what you're saying is awesome, because the story is what you relate to. For me anyway, when I'm listening to a piece of music.
in case you weren't aware, between two half steps. So I'll go to the piano real quick just to
Yeah.
demonstrate this. Between a C and a C sharp, this is a half step,
Okay.
which is the shortest interval on the piano that you can play. But actually, between those two notes, there are 100 degrees of pitch that you can actually adjust and play. Not necessarily on a piano, but maybe on another kind of instrument. And you can definitely do it with your voice. And Jacob Collier is able to identify what degree of what note is being sung.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he has not just perfect pitch, but super perfect pitch.
Wow.
Yeah. And he uses that talent in mind-blowing ways. All of his songs they take you to realms of keys of music that you never thought possible, and it's just incredible. So
I'm
he,
gonna
yeah,
check him out. Let's see if I can find some of his music and take a listen to. One last question. It's probably going to be as hard as the last one, but what is your favorite song?
uh, I feel like this changes all the time, so
Yeah.
I guess I'll just talk about one that I have on my mind right now. It's a Jacob Collier song. It's called "Into Deep." Into deep, like into like uh, too far.
Yeah.
And there's a section in it. It's kind of has two parts. The second part has it. It's just amazing to listen to and try to dissect because he layers I don't know, like 4 or 5 different rhythms on top of each other. So he does a rhythm that's like just 4 beats. Then he does a rhythm that's like 6 beats. And he does one that's like 12 and one that's 5.
Wow.
But he layers them in a way to where they all sync up at the right moment, and then it repeats. And it's hard to keep track of at first, but the more you listen to it, the more you're able to follow it. And then, like, for me, it's just fun to like kind of track one of those parts. It's like one of those parts might be like a drumstick clacking the side of the snare, and then another part might be like I don't know, like a shaker or something. So you can listen to it multiple times, and you can focus on different aspects of it, and it makes it fun to listen to each time.
Wow. In too deep. Check that out. Man, Collin, yeah. It's been awesome, man, having you on. I mean, there's so much more that we could say about, again, our relationship with music and mindfulness and how it improves our well-being. You know, I'm a pharmacist, yes, and automatically when I say that, people think, well, okay, well, you're into drugs and and using these things to help people, and there's space for that, right? I mean, there's whole industries banking on people being sick. I have my own personal opinions of those, but hey, we can share that another time, but I love talking to people about different ways of really healing. So when you experience traumatic events, or just not even traumatic, I mean, just trying to overcome the stress of studying, the stress of working, the stress of living, and you go to what we talked about today. You go to a musical number, you go to a piece of music, and you let it help you. You let it flow through you, and just again become aware and mindful of what it's doing to you and how it's impacting you. But anyway, as we end, I want to say, again, thank you for coming on. I'm sure I'll have you on again in the future to talk more about this stuff and other stuff that you're into. And by the way, I mentioned earlier, folks, Collin is, again, a recent grad, and he's going to be hoping to go away to Japan for a while to teach English. And if you want to reach him, support him, if you want to schedule, get a chance or an opportunity to schedule some virtual lessons, he's looking into setting that up as well. My man is able to teach you how to learn or how to play the piano, learn about music, and you're going to be really in for a treat because he's passionate about it and he cares about your experience. So if you want to reach him, look him up on Facebook, Collin, Collin Angell with 2 L's, and you can email him at sonicollin98@gmail.com. Collin, any last words you want to share?
Yeah, feel free to hit me up if you're interested in learning piano. I'm looking to take on new students, so any new students, anyone who's interested, feel free, and we can talk about it. I love sharing my passion for music, as Madeline said. You won't just be learning piano; you'll be learning how to play music.
There it is. Awesome, man. Awesome, wonderful. Well, Collin, thanks, man. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. I leave you with this. Focus your thoughts on what is true, noble, righteous, pure, lovable, or admirable, on some virtue or on something praiseworthy. Think about these things.